So I would like to start today by talking a little bit about what this is. Some of you may be joining us for the first time. And this is our third Friday community meeting that STAC and the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking have been hosting for several years now. And of course, pre-COVID, we were doing this in person. Starting in March of last year, or perhaps it was April, we took this program online and have had wonderful participation from people around our Big Bend area, Florida, which is in the North Florida area, the Panhandle, as well as around the state and around the country. I remember the very first one. I think I got a question from a law enforcement officer in Oklahoma. So we know that we're getting out around our nation with this great information. Each week, each month, we do these programs and highlight a different area. Often what we'll do is we will give you a little bit of information about what human trafficking is, but I will tell you, for those who attend, many people have been well grounded on what human trafficking is, and we have lots of information on STAC's website at surviveandthriveadvocacy.org if you need some more of that grounding. Today, we're really happy to have some terrific neighbors to the north, as we said in our announcement, from Georgia. But before I introduce them, and before we go into the presentation itself, I'd like to give you some grounding on who we are and what we do here in North Florida. So first of all, I'm the executive director of the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. We work in North Florida and it'll be 6 years. We'll have our 6-year birthday in February, to assist all trafficking survivors, whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking, all ages, whatever their immigration status is, U.S. citizens or non, or permanent residents, whatever it is, we are here to help. We provide case management and assistance, and the way we do this is we link with providers in our community. We do this kind of work, for example, by helping people who may have maybe unhoused. So we work with our homeless shelter. We do work with people who may have a substance use issue, and we work with our local providers there. So the only way we do our work is really arm in arm with many partners in our community and in our area. We're doing lots of work in our rural areas. Tallahassee is the county seat, if you will, for Leon County, but we assist people in surrounding areas and rural areas. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why also I'm very excited about today's presentation, because we are literally 30 minutes from the Georgia line. And many of us are even closer in Florida to Georgia. We also do a lot of public awareness, and I should have started in the top of this to tell you, welcome to January National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. We do this work also in coordination with the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking. That's our local coalition. It's headed up out of our U.S. Attorney's Office here in the Northern District of Florida and Larry Keith's office. And I co-chair that body with Frank Williams, who is an assistant U.S. attorney, and also work closely with Kelly Doherty, who is in the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Tallahassee. So we're part of a big coalition, and we really hope that you can join us, and I'll be glad to provide you more information about that as well. One of the things that we're doing this month as part of January Human Trafficking Awareness Month is we have lots and lots of resources on our website. This world that we're in right now, where we cannot be face-to-face safely, completely, is one where we really do have to do a lot of digital interactions. And so we've created a community partner toolkit that I'm going to show you a little bit about. We also created, with our partner, the International Rescue Committee, the IRC being another sponsor of this event, a poster under Florida law as of January 1. Every healthcare setting has to have a poster describing what human trafficking is and giving the National Human Trafficking Hotline number, both in English and in Spanish. We have those posters available. We've distributed 500 of them already to hospitals, clinics, doctors' offices all through our area, and we're really happy to do that. We also put our local information on that. We've made our website completely fully accessible, language-wise, and also for persons with disabilities, and this is our website address here. One of the things we've also done is created these billboards, again, reaching out into areas of our community where we know there is great vulnerability, and having this messaging in both English and Spanish. We're grateful to Leon County because we've done this with our Leon Cares money that has been available since the pandemic began. Here's an example of our information that we're sending. You know, one of the things we talked about in other programs is the correlation between people who are vulnerable to being trafficked and people who are vulnerable to COVID-19. What we see here is that we know we've got lots of changes in the world around us that make it hard for people to get out of trafficking situations, which make them vulnerable to being trafficked. We see the impact of systemic racism and implicit bias, and that more and more people who are dying and catching this disease are people in our brown and black communities. We really do have to pay attention to how we can get assistance to these communities, to all communities where there's any vulnerability, whether it's that LGBTQI+, and anyone who is in need. So this is an example of one of the flyers that we have available that makes some of those connections. We also have information going into swag bags and other things where we see our community partners passing out information at vaccination sites and other areas where we know there is that face-to-face connection with information about this. And one of the things we did, and I'll just quickly draw your attention to this at the top, you'll notice that we don't say, are you being trafficked? Because we know, I don't think STAC has ever assisted someone who identified themselves immediately as being a victim of human trafficking. So we try to depict the work we do in a way that's going to resonate with people who might be vulnerable and also provide them assistance. This is an example of some of our social media we have in our community toolkit, information, again, with many different people's faces depicted. It's a difficult thing to figure out what's to do that on that count, but what we again want to do is get the messaging out that there is an agency here, and we're again so grateful to all of our community partners who are sharing this information. So today, getting to our program, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. Their full bios, by the way, are on our website, and you saw them when you registered. But starting off right away, what I'd like to do is introduce and thank them very much for taking their time in doing all the preparation and all the work to be with us today. We're very grateful. So I'm going to actually just introduce them now by name, and then they are going to, when they begin to speak, fill in their bios a little bit and let us know more about them that they want you to know about their work in Georgia and who they are. So our three presenters today are Erica Mortensen, and she is the Human Trafficking Unit Supervisor with Georgia's Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Alina Acosta, who is the Human Trafficking Planning and Policy Development Specialist, also with the Council. Victor Williams, who's our coordinator, the coordinator of the Coalition to Combat Human Trafficking Task Force, and also with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And I'm going to put an asterisk on Victor's name because Victor, I know we get a chance to meet when you were working in Miami. So you are a Floridian who is now doing good work in Georgia, and we're grateful to you for everything you did when you were in our state and now what you are doing in Georgia. Okay, without any further from me, let me turn it over to Erica, Alina, and Victor.
Great. Thanks so much, Robin. And thank you all so much for having us here today. The collaboration between Florida and Georgia is especially near and dear to my heart. I am from South Georgia, only about 25 minutes north of the Florida line. So I know how important it is to continue to have collaboration, not only within state agencies and statewide, but also with our neighboring states and across the country as well. So as Robin said, my name is Erica Mortensen. I'm the Human Trafficking Unit Supervisor with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, or CJCC, as you'll often hear us say, we are a federal pass-through agency. So we are actually administratively attached to the GBI, or the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. So we have a couple of core missions that we do within the agency, as well as ongoing special projects that are housed under specific units. But one of those main core missions that we do is the grant administration or grant management. So we do support financially and programmatically agencies across the state, such as domestic violence programs, sexual assault, child abuse, human trafficking, and other community programs. So we actually receive money from the federal government and then are actually able to serve as that pass-through and administer those funds across the state to help crime victims. We also house victims' compensation and administer those funds as well. So anyone that has been burdened financially by their experience, within their victimization is actually eligible to apply for victims' compensation, and we handle those claims as well. So that's just a little bit about CJCC and kind of some of the core things that we do. But as I mentioned, we do house and do special initiatives statewide for various units and programs as well. And with it being human trafficking in our unit, we do have several special initiatives, and we're going to be talking a little bit with you guys today about some of those special initiatives and a lot of the statewide work that we have been able to accomplish and really push the needle forward when it comes to the anti-trafficking movement. So we can go ahead and get started. Just a little bit about me specifically. I have been with CJCC now for around 2.5 years, and prior to that, I was actually working as a program director in a sexual assault and Child Advocacy Center in Athens, Georgia. So I oversaw the adult program and mostly worked within the realm of helping those survivors access the criminal justice system, walking through the criminal justice system if that was something that they were interested in doing, but also providing therapy, both one-on-one and in a group setting. I am a clinical or a licensed clinician, so I was doing some of that clinical work directly in that direct service before I moved into more of the macro role, which I'm in now. It's just a little bit about me and kind of my background, and then we can get to Alina and Vic's information and their bios as soon as we get to their section. So we can go ahead and get started. We are going to be talking a little bit today about Georgia's response to anti-trafficking, all forms of exploitation. So I know you guys, everybody that's on the call today, all of you are in some way affiliated with the work. So this is not going to be kind of an HT 101 or educational opportunity to learn more about trafficking itself, but more so just to fill you guys in and help to bridge the gap between Florida and Georgia, to hear from you all what you guys are doing, but also to share a little bit of information, what we're doing, and see if there's partnership and collaboration that could be shared. So before we get started with some of the special initiatives and projects, we did just want to talk quickly a little bit about some legislation around human trafficking that we have been able to pass successfully here in Georgia. So our anti-trafficking law obviously is very similar to many of the other states' anti-trafficking laws, and closely aligns with the federal definition and the federal anti-trafficking law. So it's obviously kind of really mimicking that TVPA language for any person who is knowingly recruiting, enticing, harboring, transporting, providing, obtaining, or maintaining another person for that purpose of labor or sexual servitude. Here in Georgia, if that victim is an adult, it could be a felony, or it is a felony, and anywhere between 10 to 20 years in prison and a fine up to $100,000. If that victim is a minor, it's also a felony and anywhere between 25 to 50 years or life, and fine not to exceed $100,000. So under this law, both buyers and sellers can be actually charged. A little bit more about some legislation, and I'm not going to go too much into it because I know that it can be very wordy and really lengthy. So if you guys have other questions about specific legislation, I'm happy to answer that, but did want to just kind of touch on a few of these quickly. So Senate Bill 158 and or House Bill 234 is something that we have recently passed, and it really has amped up services and victim access. So I did just want to mention this specifically, and we actually do have a couple of slides just on Senate Bill 158, but wanted to make mention of it because it actually allows for DFACS, or our Child Protective Serving Agency here in Georgia, is DFACS, It actually allows them to take immediate emergency custody of trafficking victims. So they're actually able to go ahead and take a custodial charge over that trafficking victim if they're a minor, if that caretaker that they have been, or guardian that they have been under, has in some way affiliated with their trafficking or their victim experience. It also mandated trauma-informed services provided by DFACS trafficking victims using service providers. So collaborating with many of our service providers here in Georgia to offer and gain victim access to those trauma-informed services. Traffickers are now facing 25 to 50 years of life, and we just mentioned that on the previous slide. And under this statute, also child victims can no longer be charged with prostitution. So this was an issue that we were experiencing beforehand. And now, of course, with it recently have passed, we're really excited that, of course, now child victims will be seen as victims and have the appropriate access to the services that they need. Trafficking charge now extends to those who knowingly benefit from the action. And then the last bullet that I wanted to mention is it did strengthen our nuance law to empower prosecuting attorneys to close down bad actor hotels that take advantage of the exploitation of others. So any lodging establishment that might knowingly participate and/or have knowledge that exploitation is happening in their establishment, obviously now can also be held accountable. A little bit more about some legislation. So you'll see here on the left, the statute House Bill 281. This substantially increased penalties for buying or selling adults for sex. House Bill 424 did criminalize gang involvement in trafficking and allowed survivors to tell their entire story of exploitation. This was also a huge win for victim advocates across the state, knowing that the clients that they were working with were really gaining the platform to be able to share their experience and have those in the room really listen to some of the that they have endured. Senate Bill 435. This is a new vacatur legislation that just recently passed. It did vacate prior convictions if that victim may have incurred if they were charged while they were being trafficked. So obviously, we all know that oftentimes, under a trafficker's control, that victims are oftentimes asked or told to do something that obviously might be criminal in its nature. And this vacatur law that was recently passed allows them to get rid of those previous convictions if it was happening during the time of their exploitation or victimization. Senate Bill 823 did mark anyone convicted of human trafficking from getting a driver's license here in Georgia. So also a large win. We do know that trafficking happens not just in one location, but oftentimes traffickers are carrying victims across county lines, state lines, et cetera. So this was another huge win for us because it does prohibit anybody that has been charged with trafficking to ever obtain a driver's license again. And then Senate Bill 393, and this allowed district attorneys to request lawyers to prosecute crimes related to sex trafficking in gangs. And I did just want to mention that we are also an executive branch. CJCC is an executive branch and work very, very closely with the governor's office. And a lot of this legislation has been championed and pioneered by our government, by our governor's office as of late. And we really work closely with them to make sure that we're doing all that we can to uphold anti-trafficking initiatives, and they have really championed and, like I said, pioneered a lot of this movement and to continue to push the needle forward when it comes to legislation and other special initiatives. So I mentioned Senate Bill 158 on the previous slide, but I did just want to go ahead and dive in a little bit deeper on that. So Senate Bill 158 also provided CJCC the ability to certify agencies that are serving trafficking victims statutorily mandated. So as of July 1st of 2019, we did become that certifying body. So we work closely with programs that are hoping to obtain that certification. There are a few elements that make a program that's interested in becoming certified eligible. They have to follow the guidelines in order to receive that certification. So those two elements are that the program does have to show that it provides trauma-informed, comprehensive, and culturally competent services to our CSEC victims here in the state. And some of those services include residential, educational, life skills, therapeutic, and legal services. They also have to submit evidence that at least one staff member has the necessary credentials that include, but are not limited to, a license, say, in mental health services or social work, or documentation that they've completed the OVC TTAC online training, or that they have graduated from the Georgia or National Victims Assistance Academy. So again, we work really closely with these programs that are interested in becoming a human trafficking victim assistance program, helping them in providing TA and support in any way that we can, because obviously we want folks that are interested in moving into this space or serving this population to feel competent and comfortable when doing so. We also provide ongoing TA and support when those agencies do become certified. I'm going to talk quickly a little bit about our Georgia Safe Harbor Law. So our Safe Harbor Law here in Georgia does reflect the efforts of a bipartisan and coalition-based effort toward better supporting victims of trafficking. Some of those key provisions from our Safe Harbor Law, it does improve the legal standing of youth that have been identified as sex trafficking. Obviously, that is our main goal, to continue to help these victims reintegrate back into society in a safe and healthy way. So it was the establishment of a sexually exploited children fund commission using some of those fines from convicted traffickers, and also our adult entertainment industry. So there is some fines that all of our adult entertainment industry is asked to give toward the commission to continue to help these victims back reintegrate into society and give them the access to services that they need. Does extend the statute of limitations for the victims of child sex trafficking to file civil actions against their traffickers up to age 25. That a little bit more on that continued. It also expands forfeiture and seizure laws related to sex trafficking and related offense, so allowing any proceeds from trafficking and the vehicles operated by a person who's guilty of trafficking to be subject to forfeiture to the state. Also amends the state sexual offender registry to now include those convicted offenders of trafficking, and requires the development of a statewide plan for the coordinated delivery of services sexually exploited and trafficked children. So with the statewide delivery plan, that's actually something that is in its final stages at the moment, and CJCC has been fortunate enough to be part of those conversations and drafting up that statewide delivery plan. So we knew that how important it was because obviously everybody working within the field of trafficking has kind of already developed typically their own way of assessing for clients, identifying trafficking victims, and then of course giving them the services that they need. But we wanted to make sure that we were abiding by guiding principles and that everybody was operating kind of under the same umbrella, so we were all speaking the same language and continuing to stay on the same page. So in accordance with the Safe Harbor Law, Georgia is required to have that plan in place to deliver those services to our CSEC youth. And also not just CSEC youth, but our adults and our labor trafficking victims as well. So again, we really wanted to make sure that this was something statewide and stayed consistent. So service providers felt comfortable whenever they were serving a trafficking victim, if they needed somebody to help fill in that gap, that there was another agency that they could call on that was delivering services in the same way that they were. So the plan is intended to be a broad and comprehensive compilation of the services, resources, and responses needed by the state to address the complexities. And a little bit more, kind of a deeper dive into our service delivery plan. It was developed in accordance with that statute right there, focusing in large part on the issues specific to children, but again, it also does encompass our adult victims and our labor trafficking victims as well. The specific inclusionary items outlined are grouped into the broader categories of protection, recognition, recovery, restoration, and justice. And the plan supports and builds on those efforts already in place and otherwise underway to encourage a collaborative, multidisciplinary, trauma-informed, and trauma-responsive approach to combating trafficking here in Georgia. A little bit more about some of the other things that we're doing specific here in Georgia is we do have our Metro Atlanta FBI Match Task Force, and it is devoted to numerous resources to identify and prosecute traffickers. We work really closely with a lot of the Match Task Force members, and some of them are also part of our Georgia statewide human trafficking. So our Georgia statewide human trafficking task force has been up under the umbrella of CJCC for about the last 5 or 6 years now. So it was previously up under the GOSIF, or the Governor's Office for Children and Families. When GOSIF disbanded, the task force came over to CJCC, and we have been facilitating and coordinating its efforts ever since. So the statewide task force does address the 5 elements on the trafficking continuum, and those 5 elements are vulnerability, recruitment, exploitation, withdrawal, and reintegration. At the moment, we do have roughly 200 task force members representing about 90 different agencies. So this is an MDT approach. These folks that decide to join up and volunteer their time for the statewide task force are actually part of really kind of any entity that is existing in the anti-trafficking world. So this could be law enforcement, prosecutors, victim service providers, our faith-based organizations, mental health, medical, really anybody that is touched or impacted by the work or currently working within the anti-trafficking world is invited to join. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the task force so you guys can see. So as you can see, the 5 different elements right there on the trafficking continuum are listed at the top. And you'll see various groups or bullets that fall under one of those different elements. The task force does consist of 9 different work groups. Each of those 9 different work groups falls within one of those 5 different elements, and they create or develop a project, usually at the beginning of every single year, and then work on that project throughout the duration of that ongoing year. Sometimes the projects are multi-year, so it will be something that starts maybe a couple of years ago and is still ongoing at the moment. So you guys can see all the 9 different work groups right here. Historically, the task force really was created to address CSEC and our DMST victims here in Georgia and how we can better support them. But it has since evolved. In the last couple of years, we have made sure to give representation to our adult victims as well as our labor trafficking victims. So as you can see, work group 6 there does focus on foreign-born and labor trafficking. And our work group 9 there at the bottom does examine domestic adult sex trafficking. So these are the targeted focuses that each of the 9 different work groups has adopted, and they will create or develop a project that is specific to that targeted focus. So for example, community awareness and education is our work group number 1. A couple of years ago, they decided that they really wanted to make sure they were getting out into the lodging industry and notifying the lodging industry of the mandate that says that they need to have up some sort of recognition about the national human trafficking hotline and posted that somewhere in a public place within the lodging industry, but also to give lodging staff the opportunity to learn a little bit about trafficking. What are the red flags? What are those key indicators? And if you find yourself as an employee or as a staff person working in a hotel or a motel or any of our other lodging industries, if you find yourself suspicious of some activity that's going on, what are the next steps that you can take? So they really focused their project, and it was ongoing at the time. It spanned over a couple of years to really get out into the community and notify our lodging industry about this mandate and really what that can mean for them should they not, go ahead and uphold that. Supporting some other statewide efforts with grant funding. So last year, CJCC provided a total of $6.3 million in grant funding and dedicated to the combating of human trafficking in Georgia. Some of those funding initiatives included law enforcement response, direct victim services, the Receiving Hope Center, which we'll talk about in just a second, coordination of projects addressing all aspects of human trafficking continuum, and we'll also talk about that in a second. And then training to improve the criminal justice and medical response to human trafficking. So some of those funding sources include TANF, or Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, VOCA, or Victims of Crime Act, and then BJA, our Bureau of Justice Assistance. So we're very fortunate to continue to seek out funding opportunities because we know that our programs and our stakeholders and partners across the state are continuing to look to elevate their current services and or grow, and continue to develop. So we as a coordinating agency and a coordinating body want to continue to help them access those services with securing grant funding. So I just mentioned the Receiving Hope Center. So just to give you guys a little bit of information about what that is, the Receiving Hope Center actually just opened last year in February, I believe, in February of 2020. So it is a triage center for our DMST or CSEC youth here in the state of Georgia. Wellspring Living is actually the operator of this center. It is new and it's brand new in its nature, and it does use that compassionate wraparound service delivery model to help stabilize youth that come into the program. So these are youth, what we were finding here in Georgia was that we were, law enforcement would be calling service providers, 2 a.m. saying, I have a suspected trafficking victim, really kind of unsure of what to do with them. They're not able to return back home. Where somewhere that we can take them, or how can we best access, services and assess for their needs. So we at CJCC did open up competitive funding, and that competitive funding was awarded to Wellspring Living after they submitted their proposal and application to become the operator of this triage center. So it does have 20 beds, and it is through a public and private partnership. Some of those services that Wellspring or the Receiving Hope Center does offer includes obviously their immediate medical attention, secure shelter, education, mental health, ongoing needs assessments, therapeutic services, et cetera. So it is a short-term program. It is not meant to be a long-term program. It is a client or a participant only really stays at the Receiving Hope Center for up to 90 days. But it is that triage kind of stabilization time period where they can assess for that youth's needs. And then if they find that youth does need more of a long-term programmatic intervention, they will refer out to one of our DMST centers or residential programs here in the state. Some state standards for our DMST safe homes. So we at CJCC also have worked with other partners and stakeholders across the state to really kind of collaborate and come up with some state standards for our residential programs that specifically house DMST or CSEC youth. So that was established to unify criteria on how service providers receive or intake those DMST youth and provide care. Those standards were obviously designed to identify residential facilities across the state that deliver trauma-informed and survivor-focused service directly with vetted service providers. So we do, again, provide that ongoing support and TA to our residential programs across the state that are serving our DMST youth. And this looks like kind of a different amount of different things where we are working with those programs, helping those programs get up and started. If it's a new program that's interested in becoming certified and working collaboratively with us, DJJ and DFACS. That collaboration for the residential programs does allow them to receive youth and work collaboratively with our other state partners. Some of those residential programs for DMST youth that we do have here in Georgia are listed here on the map. As you can see, the ones with the tick lines over them are our programs that are currently certified, and the ones that are not are in the midst or potentially will be certified very soon. So as you can see, and I know that you guys are I'm sure all too familiar with this, there is such a great need for housing, not only for our DMST or CSEC youth here in Georgia, but for our adult population as well as young boys and transgender youth. I did want to just quickly mention that the Receiving Hope Center that I just spoke about does take on not only girls, but also boys and transgender youth as well. But that being said, we know that there could be many, many more, and there's such a great need for bed space, not only for our youth, but for our adult population as well. And these are the counties in which those DMST residential facilities exist. So as you can see, there's a large amount that are kind of centered around the metro area. We do have one coastal and then one in South Georgia as well. So a few of the trainings that we offer either through the task force and or just through the CJCC human trafficking unit kind of internally are listed here. We do get many requests for trainings and try to fulfill those, and things look a little bit different now. Obviously, we are all meeting in a virtual manner right now. But prior to the pandemic, we were going out and delivering trainings kind of statewide to both law enforcement, medical providers, the hospitality industry, as I mentioned, and then those first responders that are interested in learning a little bit more about foreign-born or our foreign national population. That is kind of on an as-request basis. But we do try to go out and continue to offer that community support and education or awareness as much as possible. It just has been a little bit limited, of course, due to the pandemic, but we're finding new and innovative ways to continue to deliver trainings. I'm going to turn it over now to Alina, and she's going to talk to you guys about the Georgia Labor Trafficking Roundtable report that we just recently developed and released in November of last year. So, Alina.
Thank you, Erica. Once again, my name is Alina Acosta, and I'm the Human Trafficking Planner and Policy Development Specialist with CJCC. I'm also a member of the statewide Human Trafficking Task Force, and I work specifically as the chair of Work Group 6, which focuses on foreign nationals and labor trafficking. So today I'm going to be talking to you all about Georgia's Labor Trafficking Roundtable report, which is actually an initiative that came out of that statewide task force. But before I go into the details of the report, I did want to provide some context. So as Erica mentioned, there are 9 different working groups on the statewide task force, and each of those working groups are expected to create, develop, and execute a yearly project. So Work Group 6, focused on foreign nationals and labor trafficking, our project for 2020 was this Labor Trafficking Roundtable report. And so essentially, the origins of this report stem from the important conversations had back in November of 2019, when Work Group 6 convened experts and stakeholders from all around the state for a special, our first ever really, labor trafficking roundtable discussion. And we had representation from all across the state and various industries. And so why? Why did we host this roundtable? Work Group 6 realized that though labor trafficking is happening in the United States, and obviously in Georgia, It's less visible and severely underreported, especially in comparison to its counterpart, sex trafficking. So thus, the purposes of this convening, as you can see on this slide, was to begin conversations that would yield to actionable steps that would educate, would raise awareness about forced labor in Georgia, and of course, better identify and serve trafficked persons. Needless to say, our roundtable discussion was a success. The participation was incredible, the conversations were productive and fruitful, so much so that Workgroup 6 members saw the importance of putting pen to paper and putting everything that these experts had spoken about into a report, and thus creating an educational tool that would raise awareness about labor trafficking as well as provide action steps for community and state action. And so thus, all of 2020, we spent, creating this groundbreaking new report. And why do we say groundbreaking? Because it really is the first of its kind in Georgia. And we're very proud of it. It marks a renewed commitment to ending all forms of human trafficking, within our state, but specifically focused on labor trafficking. And so I do believe that Robin was going to be disseminating a link to the report or access for you all. I highly recommend, if you have the time, please look through the report. It is 19 pages. It's very easy to read. It's beautifully written. As you can tell, I'm a little biased, but truly, I do recommend if you have the time. But I figured that for the purposes of this presentation, that there would be value in just kind of going over the structure for you all and just kind of highlighting some key points. So obviously we have that introduction, what is labor trafficking, the overview, looking at risk factors and victim identification, and then of course, Georgia's landscape. So this is the part of the report that is definitely Georgia specific. It has those data, those statistics, it has Georgia cases, and it also looks at Georgia's industries that unfortunately tend to be more vulnerable to this type of exploitation. But with that being said, I do want to pause in saying that though this is a state report coming from Georgia, Workgroup 6 members, we were very thoughtful when creating this report, when crafting the language, that though it would be seemingly Georgia specific, that any state that wanted to learn more, that wanted to raise awareness and learn about action steps to better combat this crime, could easily take this educational tool and adapt it to their state perspective. And I'm confident in saying that as you go through the entire report, you can see this, especially in the next part, where it says expert responses to the key questions. So these 4 questions, these make up the meat of the report. And these are the very 4 same questions that guided the conversations back in 2019. So as you can see, how do we increase awareness about labor trafficking? How do we better serve victims of labor trafficking? How do we capture data on this form of exploitation? And what can be done on a state level? And so as you read this, though it will be Georgia specific, those key considerations, those recommendations, and those action steps that are underneath these sections, you can see can easily be adapted and were meant to be taken across our state line. And then of course, in conclusion, the report does conclude with specific recommendations and action steps to guide our state, any state, in its effort to combat labor trafficking and of course support survivors. And so I just wanted to put a few of the many recommended action steps that you will find in this report, and just to kind of highlight a few of them. So the importance of identifying key stakeholders, agencies, and officials who will champion, who will make labor trafficking cases and issues in your state a priority, the importance of that. Of course, the importance of developing a statewide labor trafficking protocol, of developing and distributing trainings that are victim-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally appropriate, especially given the population that you're trying to address. Of course, data is always going to be important. Developing a centralized reporting system and or database for identifying labor trafficked persons. Funding. That's always going to be important, especially when you're trying to engage in widespread efforts to combat labor trafficking. We also target public awareness, public outreach, and if you have those campaigns, make sure that it's done with consistent and targeted messaging that reflects the lived experiences of survivors. And obviously, depending on which state it is, those lived experiences are going to be different, obviously dependent on that state's culture, geography, etc. And then of course, labor trafficking and businesses are highly connected. So the importance of educating and empowering local businesses to engage in anti-trafficking practices. And then finally, I just want to end with the importance of encouraging collaboration across your state, of having a multidisciplinary response focused on combating labor trafficking. Making sure that all different various sectors are participating, that you're pooling in your resources and expertise. And I put, for example, a task force that, is focused on human trafficking, but truly has a focus and sets a priority on labor trafficking. And what that will just say, especially just supporting these types of victims. And so with that, I will end by saying, please, if you have the time, look through that report. We're very proud of it, as you can see, and we're very excited for what is to come. Work Group 6, on behalf of the statewide Human Trafficking Task Force, we see the report as a stepping stone to bigger and better things, especially in regards to labor trafficking and Georgia's response to combating it. So with that being said, I am done. Thank you so much for the time and your attention, and I will hand it over to Victor Williams for another exciting state initiative. Thank you.
And if I could interrupt just for a second and echo what you said, Alina, as Victor comes on, that it was this report that came to our attention here as Victor posted it on the Heal Trafficking website, and it just blew me away. So there's no question, everything that Alina said could easily be applied to Florida, especially in this area of North Florida, where, again, the state line is very permeable when it comes to migrant farm workers going across from farm to farm in our area to Georgia, back to Florida, and then downstate. So we're really grateful on this report and all your work on that. And Victor, thank you so much for being active and sharing it.
My pleasure. And we can go to, there we go. So no, it was a pleasure sharing that information. My name is Vic Williams. I am a retired special agent with Homeland Security Investigations out of Miami. The last 8 years of my career, I worked human trafficking. It changed my life. It just made a big difference in everything that I understand from a cultural aspect that really is what feeds human trafficking. 6 of those last 8 years, I was the coordinator for the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force. I see my good friend Terry Coonan on board today and wanted to say hello to him and, all the great work that he's doing for Florida. But one of the things that I was really proud of, in coordinating the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force was that bringing the community together and getting things done. Nothing gets done alone in this work, but it was just great working with everyone. And a lot of the laws, from the signage law to even the laws that now nurses and doctors have to, have human trafficking training. That was a lot of work and bringing the community together to get things done. But since I retired in 2018, I came to Atlanta, and initially my first couple of years, I was team security for the Atlanta Hawks. And then I realized that, this passion that I have for human trafficking, working with people to get things done was still burning in my soul. So this past July, when I left the Hawks, an opportunity came to, they were looking for a coordinator for this new initiative, the Georgia Coalition to Combat Human Trafficking. So I don't know how this worked out, but I'm here, and it was just perfect timing, and I am where I should be. Just a little bit about how the coalition came about. CJCC received dual awards from BJA and OVC, partnered with GBI. When you look at the board and when you look at the makeup, this is the first state level law enforcement based task force, solely focused on human trafficking. 2 equal purposes: sex trafficking, adult and minor, and labor trafficking are what we are looking to address. Our goal is to create a unified, trauma-informed, comprehensive response to all forms of human trafficking in Georgia so that victims are safe and offenders are held accountable. We use the core team model. It's funny, when I was putting this organization together and the core team model came up, I told our program director, Amy Hutzel, that, wow, I think I was using this core team model when I was working at the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force and didn't even realize it. That task force at the time was not a funded task force. It is now, and they're still doing great work in South Florida. So our core team model is basically a setup of law enforcement, service providers, and prosecutors. And you'll see how that board comes together in a second. Our mission statement was very important. We know working in this world or any world, we always have issues and people are, just crossing each other the wrong way, or messages are not happening in the right way. So we wanted our mission statement to remind us whenever we are mixed up on everything else that's going on in the world, we wanted to have a mission statement to bring us back to focus and why we are here. The mission statement, the mission of the Georgia Coalition to Combat Human Trafficking is built and support consistent collaboration between law enforcement, victim service providers, and state agencies while strengthening the victim-centered, trauma-informed approach to combat all forms of human trafficking so that victims are safe and offenders are held accountable. Again, we wrote this together so that when everything is confusing, this brings us back to what we're here and why we're working together. When we look at our board, again, Georgia Bureau of Investigation is our law enforcement partner. So Jeff Ressler is the SAC of the HEAT unit, which stands for Human Exploitation and Trafficking. So that HEAT unit came together. It's only makes up of 4 agents covering the whole state. But we look to the expansion of that as we grow. We have over 600 law enforcement agencies in Georgia, 35,000 law enforcement people, and my goal is to get them all trained. My boss jokes with me a lot saying, Vic, you're reaching high. And I'm like, well, if you don't reach high, you won't get there. So it is a huge task, but we have a plan to get that done. Our prosecuting partner is Hannah Palmquist, who is an attorney or prosecutor with the Attorney General's Office Human Trafficking Unit. And our board members are Andrea Hipwell, who works for Wellspring, Amy Boney, who works with the Child Advocacy Center of Georgia, and Maya Hassick, who works with Tapestry. I'll give you a little bit more on that. So when we looked at setting this, program together, I wanted to keep it simple. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So when you look at our structure, for some of you that don't know, human trafficking laws have only been on the books since the year 2000. And in that year 2000, the United Nations came together with all the nations of the world and Italy and charged all nations to deal with their human trafficking issues by the 3 Ps: protection, prevention, and prosecutions. But since then, there's been a 4th P that's been added: partnership. Again, nobody can fight this fight alone. So these are the pillars that make up the coalition. When you see the statewide human trafficking task force at the bottom, they are our foundation. They've been there, like Erica said, for about 5 years, a lot of working groups. So all the working groups that feed into the vulnerability, recruitment, exploitation, withdrawal, and reintegration, they all fulfill our pillars of protection, prevention, and prosecution. So you can see, we're really a solid team working together. We have monthly meetings, to stay focused on our programs, because it is those working groups and subcommittees that makes these programs work and bring us all together. The one thing that I would say about the Georgia State Human Trafficking Task Force, they mainly are our community connection. They have open enrollments every year, which invites the community to join. And we love that, because it is our community that feeds that new energy, that keeps us going, that comes in with new ideas. So the statewide human trafficking task force is our community section. For the coalition, it is invitation only. Mostly all law enforcement, prosecuting offices, and different organizations to support victims. It is one of those, in the coalition we don't just, it's not open to the community. It's an invite only to our program. So in the coalition task force subcommittees, we have law enforcement, victim services, outreach and prevention, training, and strategic planning, policy, and legislation. I have to say, out of all of these programs, they're all important. They all feed the coalition. They keep the coalition alive. Our partnerships. I just had my victim services meeting yesterday for the first time of this new year. And some of the projects that they're going to work on is finding the holes that we have within our victim services. It's finding ways to identify those holes and then finding ways to address them. What we learn is that, you know, we don't know our issues until we know our issues. Again, in keeping our coalition simple, it is educating people to understand what human trafficking is and what to do when you find it. That's our two components, education and what to do when you find it. So like our victim service subcommittee, again, is we have a great unit of what you do. And I'm going to go into that a little bit later. But those holes, again, you don't know your issues until you know your issues. And we found out that we had some issues over the holiday season when we had a victim pop up. And when you think everything is going to run smoothly, it didn't. But because of the great team of people that I work with, we did not stop until we found this survivor now a place to you know, move on and to eventually have the life that she wants. Our partnerships, we work with state partners. You guys, we call it DFACS here in Florida. You call it DCF. Our direct services, Tapestry, and one thing I forgot. So Wellspring deals with our adult, you know, human trafficking victims. Tapestry deals with our labor trafficking victims, and the Children Advocacy Center of Georgia deals with our children. And they have over 52 units all over the state. One thing that, you know, I wanted to bring up that map and we didn't throw it in here, but they have 52 units all over the state dealing with our child issues with human trafficking. Also, we have our federal, state, and local partners that we work for. I mean, the biggest difference, and it's a huge difference, when I was the coordinator of the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force, it was just in that South Florida area. It is such a big difference working from the state perspective, which, you know, I encourage everybody to try to find that collaboration or to bring, you know, the different components together. Working from the state perspective, it's just a different animal in itself. And to keep it simple, we just want to get people trained to understand what human trafficking is. And we already have what you do when you find it. So the state perspective is really challenging, but I think every state needs to have that view, because it's not just your areas that are dealing with this, it's the entire state. So, and if I remember, I think Georgia is still number 3 in that list of states when it comes to human trafficking.
So Vic mentioned CACGA, or Children's Advocacy Centers of Georgia. So last year, we have been quite busy within CJCC, and last year, yes, October 1st, so just a few months ago, we actually transitioned all of the statewide care coordination over to CACGA, or that Children's Advocacy Centers of Georgia, like Vic mentioned. So we released a competitive opportunity for folks that were in the state of Georgia to apply to become that statewide care coordinating body for all of our identified DMST youth here in the state. So CACGA, as Vic mentioned, is part of that larger children's advocacy network for all of Georgia. They do have those 52 centers across the state, and those 52 centers do help to coordinate the transition and all of those services that are needed when working with a DMST or CSEC victim. It is very comprehensive. They have those regional offices and regional sections, and we're going to talk about that in just, I think, another slide or so. But just wanted to mention to you guys that we have been very busy working closely with CACGA to ensure that they have everything that they need, TA and support, to go ahead and begin that transition of services and coordinate all of those statewide services for our DMST youth. So some of those services that are included, but not limited to, is that 24-hour hotline. So Vic did talk, Vic, and I believe you'll speak a little bit more in depth about the hotline, and you've already identified those hotline partners, but they are our hotline partner for all of CSEC youth here in the state. So they do provide that 24-hour, 365-day access for anybody that is looking to seek services or more information about how to help a CSEC youth. Comprehensive assessment, case plan and management, those forensic interviews and specialized medical exams. So obviously being part of that 52 CAC kind of network here in the state, they obviously have already worked very closely with our forensic interviewers and our medical team. So SANE nurses that provide those sexual assault nurse exams or examinations to anybody that has been identified as a victim of sex trafficking. So going ahead and just utilizing and capitalizing on the networks and collaboration that they have already built for such a long time, and really making sure to bring them into the fold, because we do know that any youth or adult that has experienced sex trafficking has also experienced sexual assault and or sexual abuse. So making sure that their needs are being met really comprehensively and providing that wraparound service plan. Advocacy, intensive therapy, and then additional referral methods. So if there, for some reason, is a youth that comes that calls on the hotline and or a caregiver or concerned, say a counselor or a social worker, is able to access the hotline and bring that child to CACGA or bring them into the fold of CACGA or one of those 52 CACs across the state. But say that child has ongoing special requirement or needs more intensive kind of intervention, whatever the case is, CACGA will actually work with other programs here in Georgia to make sure that that child's needs are being met.
I want to just bring this point out to everybody. The way we look at things here when there's tragedy or any problems, instead of, like sucking that bad energy in, the great thing about my team is that we just try to find the positive things. What can we learn from the negative stuff to build on? And one of the things that happened as we were brainstorming, this is not to badmouth the National Human Trafficking Hotline, but it's almost like a credit to their work, that if you try to call the hotline, it's a 30-minute wait. And it's really tough when, especially if you have a victim that's trying to call in, it's really tough to expect that victim to wait on the phone for 30 minutes. What we came up with when we had some changes in our services is that we came up with our hotline tree. We're sitting around, and it was actually Erica that came up with the NHTGA, which was brilliant, because when you do call the hotline and they do, you do get them on the line and you say, I'm a victim in Georgia, they're going to call that hotline. And in that hotline, if that person on the other line needs help from law enforcement, they're going to hit 1 and the GBI would be answering that phone. It's 24 hours and we'll have agents ready to roll depending on what the call is. Number 2, it deals with our minor services. Again, the Children's Advocacy Center of Georgia, our new partner that came on, it goes directly to them. If you have an adult, it goes to our Outer Darkness program. And if you have a labor trafficking issue, it goes to Tapestry. And our number 5 is the residential program, Receiving Hope Center that Erica was talking about. It is so important. This is like the biggest thing. It would be great if there was an NHTFL or a TX. I mean, I don't know what that number would look like, but I think we all know one of the biggest problems with human trafficking is that there is no one national program that is directing states and cities to deal with human trafficking. So until that happens, we have to find these easy ways for our people to come together, or victims to call, or people to report. I love this idea that if every state had their own number as a state perspective, it would make a big difference. And especially for even the national hotline, when you call them, they're looking for those services based on what the caller's needs are. And they're going through, just a list. You hit this one number, it gives you everything that we have to provide in the state of Georgia. And I think this is one of the biggest things that we came up with that really I think most states can mimic, and it can make that connection a lot easier. I just want to go back a couple of minutes and talk about one of the things that we're planning on, and I just talked to my program director today, is adding a medical subcommittee. One of the great things that happened working in Florida is that we came up and working together with the community, the University of Miami and Jackson Hospital. Florida was one of the few states that had a clinic specifically for human trafficking victims. It was such one of those moments that, you know, we were leading the way. We're still working hard. The Thrive Clinic in Florida is still there. It only serves human trafficking victims. And so right now, we're actually working on the same thing here, finding that clinic that just address human trafficking victims. And so also the Nova Southeastern University have medical treatment that they have the CREATE program that gives dental therapy and optometry services to victims of human trafficking. That is huge. That is so huge. And it was one of the biggest things that in working in South Florida that we were able to bring together. And again, South Florida was one of the first states to come up with these clinics, which was great. We talk a lot about human trafficking and sometimes the LGBTQ, that community is not talked about a lot. Here in Florida, we're partnering with an organization called Someone Cares. It is a great program. We had a site visit last year to check out all the work that they're doing. They also have a medical section that provides services, which is great. The last thing I'm going to talk about and turning it back over to Erica is that what's important in working human trafficking is to be able to find numbers, the data. We have a statistical analytic center that amazing. It is almost like a game changer to us. All our members will have access to this information, and basically to give you an idea of how it works. They partner with the Department of Labor. And so we get like all the, say, pay violations or visa violations. We have access to that information. And the way the information works, it spreads out all over Georgia. We have 159 counties. So if we got a business in one of the counties and we see that there's a huge violations in pay, that could be some indication of trafficking or labor trafficking. So this, our SAC unit is very valuable, given that access to all our members. They hit on the county that they're in. They can look at certain issues that they're having. If we see like visa violations, it can focus us on certain areas. We have gang issues, and they give us gang arrests. One of the things that we discovered, and this is thinking out the box, we all know that gang units have a sex human trafficking connection to it. What we discovered that all gang activity based on Georgia laws of coercion and basically on coercion, gangs are all labor trafficking issues. No one ever thought about that until we had that conference. And I think there's only one state that ever had a case that charged a gang with labor trafficking. Think about it. It is coercion all over. If I'm not part of the gang, what? I get beat up or killed. So that's something that we're expanding on our gang units here. So our SAC unit did a great job of coming up with these numbers. So just wanted to mention those few things. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Erica to finish up.
So we were just speaking before a little bit about the hotline and some of those partners. And I did just want to kind of circle back to some of the other partners that we do have there in the Southern region and kind of give them a shout out, but also to highlight them and express to you all that I think that as we continue to grow the collaboration between Georgia and Florida and find ways to really partner, a lot of these partners will be, I think, very instrumental in helping this collaboration and the partnership continue to evolve and grow. So I did just want to mention a few of those partners that will be very close to you guys there in North Florida. So our Southern U.S. Attorney's Office does have a human trafficking task force specific to that jurisdiction, and it's called the GAS Task Force. We also work closely with SWAT, or Savannah Working Against Human Trafficking. That is kind of an MDT approach where folks are coming together, kind of similar to the statewide task force, but just more again on that kind of regional and coastal level, where it is that MDT, prosecutors, law enforcement, victim service providers coming together to really kind of find out what does trafficking look like in Savannah, and then what are some things that those working in the field can do to really be combative against trafficking going on in their own jurisdiction or in their own community. The HEAT unit, I know that Vic spoke a little bit about our relationship with GBI and that partnership. So the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit, which has offered those 4 identified GBI agents to work exploitation or trafficking cases across the entire state. And that Southern Region contact for you guys, and I'm happy to share their contact information more, is Danielle O'Connor. So she is actually that GBI agent dedicated to the HEAT unit, working cases down there in the Southern Region, and as that contact. And then the Georgia Gang Investigators Association, Vic spoke a second ago about the intersection, between gang activity and human trafficking. And obviously we know that it's ongoing here in Georgia. We do experience a lot of gang activity happening, and we know that a lot of times that is closely affiliated with or intersecting with trafficking as well. So we're working with them currently to create a certification for training for those gang investigators on the intersection of gang activity and trafficking. And we'll continue to, hopefully that will come to fruition, I believe, in the next couple of months. So we're hoping to have something rolled out for them by spring. But again, just to really put it on those investigators' radar, that this is something likely that when working those gang investigations, that you might be seeing and not be aware that this is something that's going on within that specific gang that you might be looking into or investigating. But I did want to give you guys a little bit more information about CACGA, because they actually, as I mentioned, do have those kind of regional coordinating bodies all across the state. And so I felt like it would be really important to share their Southern Region contact information with you guys. And that's on the next slide. But here are those different regions kind of spanned out. So you have the North, Metro, West, East, and South region. And that Southern region, which you guys might actually benefit most from, and or at least have the most communication or contact with, is going to be broken down into 3 of our DFACS regions. So as you can see, it's going to be that 8, 10, and 11 region close down to the bottom of Georgia. So Leslie Lamb is actually the Southern Regional Care Coordinator with CACGA. And again, happy to share her direct contact information so you all actually have somebody close by that if you are working DMST cases or CSEC cases there in North Florida, or really even statewide for you guys, you actually have a contact that you can collaborate and work closely with. Say a case has kind of moved maybe from a victim has been taken across state lines from Georgia to Florida or vice versa, and you all just need a contact on how to most appropriately move that case forward. I recommend definitely reaching out to CACGA and letting them be your point of contact, because a lot of their staff does actually live and work in South Georgia, but we did want to make sure that we were providing Leslie's contact information. And actually Leslie has been in the work, I think, for over 20 years. So she's very well versed with trafficking and is really an expert in the field. So we wanted to make sure, again, like I said, that we were providing that for you guys. And then some of CACGA's CSEC response and those initial services are broken down here by the map, as you guys can see. So currently to date, or I believe at least it was a couple of weeks ago, when the last time we got some data from them, to date, they have had 111 hotline calls total. And then that's broken down into kind of various ways in which those calls kind of come through. So, again, it could be from a victim directly, reaching out and asking for help. But a lot of times what we're seeing is partners and other stakeholders are using that hotline to bring CACGA into the fold and figure out what's the best way to access services for that specific or suspected youth. And then the child and youth suspected victimization referrals are 145. Closed and referred are at 15 right now, and then they actually have 130 active cases ongoing. So again, you can see there on the map the different regions that are broken down. And I believe that the red flags the pinpoints that you all are seeing are where some of those referrals and where some of those clients have come from. So contacting them again, that is their direct line. I know that Vic shared the information or their specific information through the NHTGA hotline that we have set up here in Georgia, but that's also a direct line and referral form for CACGA. Highly recommend you guys checking them out if you are working CSEC cases there in Florida and, you know, unknowingly have a client that or a victim that has come across state lines. Really recommend you guys utilizing them and checking them out and some of those services that they offer. And again, they're number 2 on that hotline tree. Happy to provide some more information or some more contact information for that if you guys need. But just also wanted to know that their website is HIPAA compliant and it does have that HIPAA compliant referral form. So I know that we only have maybe about 15 minutes and we were going to leave it open, I believe, Robin, for Q&A from you guys. But there are a couple of things that we as, you know, Georgians wanted to hear from Florida and kind of just know a little bit more about how you all are structured, your statewide task forces or your regional task forces, kind of really what does that look like? What are your processes when dealing with highway interdiction, right? We know that with South Georgia, obviously with 75 running straight into Florida, as well as I-16, you know, leading us down to the coastal region there in Georgia as well. Some of these major highways we know are being utilized for traffickers to bring victims across state lines, county lines, and really kind of move them around from place to place, you know, as another way to stay undetected. So we just really want to know if you guys are doing anything within highway interdiction. Love to learn from you all and kind of hear about any other specific initiatives that you guys have going on. And then really just be able to kind of brainstorm together collaboratively as states. What are some ways, you know, in which we can better partner and or share resources? So again, we can learn from you all and hopefully be a better partner and a better neighboring state to you all.
So, Alina, Erica, Vic, thank you. That was tremendous. And again, the origins of what we're trying to do is exactly what these questions kind of get to, which is how do we work better together? It looks like having this conversation right now is a great first start, and I hope we will, you know, continue the back and forth. And I know many of us will try to get on your mailing list and whatnot so that we can attend public meetings and do things that will allow us to keep tabs on what you're doing so that we can improve what we're doing here as well. So to answer some of the questions, we can tell you that Florida has a statewide human trafficking council and also a newly established direct service organization, a DSO, that's called the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking. And those two bodies are statewide in nature. I think that it'll be great. I know, Vic, you mentioned Terry Coonin's on the line. He's a member of our statewide council, and there may be some others. I can't tell exactly from the participants, but if you'd like to introduce yourselves or say something on the chat, please do. We also have, because the council is out of the Attorney General's office, we have individual task forces like the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking, which is a co-host of this event, and the South Florida Task Force, which Vic mentioned, and task forces and coalitions throughout Florida. And we've got those links as well posted on the Attorney General's website. We don't have, in terms of our approach, we don't have anything that is as structured and evolved into a comprehensive look as you have and from a statewide level. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to kind of learn what y'all are doing. The other thing that I would say too is, and just to ask anyone if we have any Florida Child Advocacy Center representatives here, we often have representatives from the statewide office on our calls. But what you have done with the CACs is tremendous. And it's one of the reasons why, you know, first of all, grateful to have Leslie Lamb's information. We have had incidences where, you know, just across 30 minutes away from my front door is Thomasville, Georgia. We've had survivors in that area where we've definitely needed help and assistance as STAC has gone to help with those children and youth. So we're happy to know about that. I think that in terms of the highway interdiction piece, I'd really like to, I know a little bit about that, but being a service provider, you know, that's not our bailiwick. I will tell you that here, though, I have talked with and we've met with our local law enforcement, and we do know that there are the collaborations in place across law enforcement lines in terms of, sheriffs and local police, state FDLE, and others, where they do have targeted efforts on human trafficking, drug interdiction, and others that are really focused on those arteries that you mentioned and even more, Erica. So I think that might be an opportunity for us to kind of frame some conversations going forward. I'd love to connect you with some of the organizers of those efforts because they're multi-level and they're multi-subject. It's not just around human trafficking. It's overall drugs and other crimes. So I know we've got those, and I'd actually ask anybody who's attending now, if you have any more information on that, please put it into the chat. Okay, so could I ask a question? I have something that I was thinking about when you all were talking. It is so strong to have the collaboration around child sex trafficking, and one of the big research reports that came out in Florida was the need to focus more on child labor trafficking, as well as children who are both sex and labor trafficked. So, so thinking back maybe to the labor trafficking report, but also in general, the work that you all have done. Can you talk about labor trafficking and child victims and what you might have seen there?
Well, one of the things that, and addressing the labor trafficking issues that we have out of the HEAT unit and the 4 agents that we have, we do have one specifically for labor trafficking. They work all trafficking. You have one agent that's specifically for labor trafficking. And mainly it's about just training and education. One of the biggest problems we have, and I had this problem when I was working in Florida in the Homestead area, is getting the population to trust law enforcement. We were able to get some good cases going on in Florida, but they came through by the people who are serving that community. They trusted law enforcement. They trusted us because we were educated on these issues. It wasn't about putting people in jail. We worked from that victim-centered approach. And so our partners from that aspect that we're working with labor, working with that labor population trusted us, and that's how we got good cases. Being new, again, I've only been here since July. So that's why, Erica jumped in on some of the landscape of this PowerPoint, because I'm still learning myself. But we do have a plan, and having Tapestry on board and the connection that they have with our labor community and working, sitting on the board with GBI, hopefully we're gonna see as we continue to train that collaboration come more together, and we'll see more labor trafficking aspects. One thing I would say about all our service providers, they do serve all nationals, foreign-born people, they do serve them all. So it's just really educating and getting those people to trust us and our approach. And that's why when we did the phone tree, not everybody wants to talk to law enforcement right away. They just want service providers. And that's why we set it up that way. I hope that answered the question. You're muted.
Yes, thank you. I know too that, we absolutely don't want to segregate it to, like you're saying, just only thinking of labor trafficking happening in factories or fields. That we do know, as you were saying, gangs. I thought that was fascinating, Vic, to really have that light bulb go off like, hey, this is labor trafficking. Of course it is. And so we have seen cases around the nation where children are forced into labor, as well as are vulnerable to that. So I did just get a question about the link, and I want to Randy, that the link to the report on labor trafficking and child trafficking. I will be glad to get that, and I want to put my email is robin@surviveandthriveadvocacy.org. I can't get it to you quickly, Randy, but I'd like to get it to you. So if you could email me that question, I'll be able to respond to you on that, and also be able to include it on our resources when we put those up on the STAC website afterwards. Okay, any other questions or things that you all are thinking about as you reflect, maybe thinking about what you do in terms of your work going forward that you would like to do?
Well, I do see a question that someone was asking about our training at schools. On the statewide human trafficking task force, and maybe Erica, she could speak more to this, but we do have some connections and some of those work groups working directly with children and educating. I don't know if we have that direct connection yet with education. Do you know, Erica?
I'm happy to speak to that. So actually, one of our work groups on the statewide task force is actually work group 2, and they focus on youth awareness and safety, and largely prevention. So what they did is they developed it's been several years ago, but they created what's called the TARG, or the Technical Assistance Resource Guide. So you guys I can share that link with you all in the chat, but what the TARG does, it's a very hefty document. So if you're interested in some light reading, I suggest you take a look. But what they did is it's really kind of compiling a bunch of information. So the work group decided to kind of vet what are some programs out there that are geared towards school-age children and or educators, parents, et cetera. What are some prevention trainings or awareness opportunities that children are gaining access to, and a little bit about some of those specific programs. So what they did is they created a rubric guided by CDC's recommendations, and they looked at some of these programs across the country, like I said, that are really geared towards prevention in a school system setting. And based on some of those vetting the processes and a lot of looking into those specific programs, they created their top recommendations for school-based programs around prevention for sexual abuse and or sexual exploitation, and then release that out to really kind of anybody that's interested in reading more about it. So they gave their top recommendations of some of those prevention programs in a school-based setting, again, that are geared towards, or circling around information about sexual exploitation or sexual abuse. So I'm happy to share the link with that with you guys. There's been several kind of talks about, there's so many new programs popping up that are available in school settings and that sort of thing. So while we don't specifically offer trainings in a school system setting, we do kind of have that larger list and that really kind of lofty document that does give educators and or school systems guidance on what are some appropriate programs to implement or to offer your students.
That's something that I'd like to also share with our Florida Department of Education and give them a shout out too. A year ago, December, they actually passed a rule that requires every school K-12 in Florida to have comprehensive education of students as well as school personnel. So I'm figuring they already know about it, but if not, Valerie Ellery, who's with DOE, has presented on these Third Friday programs, and it would be great to know more. I also wanted, as we get ready to close, we've got 1 minute. Terry Coonan at the Center for the Advancement of Human Rights notes that the Department of Agriculture also has some highway interdiction efforts and has taken the statewide lead on that. So that's something we can follow up with you on as well. So what I'd like to do is right now just turn it quick back over to USF. Thank you all so much. That was so much great information. It really warms my heart to know that that we've now had this interaction between our two states, and especially all the great things in the work you've been doing. Let us consider this the first start to the beginning of a beautiful relationship, as they say. So you all, Alina, Erica, and Vic, thank you.